Hola amigos y bienvenidos. Welcome back to the channel. One of the most common concerns I hear from students in their 40s, 50s, 60s and up is that their memory just isn't what it used to be in their 20s or 30s. And if you've ever had this concern, then there are a few things you need to know. Number one, what does science actually say about your memory as you get older? Number two, what does language learning do to your brain as you age? And number three, how should you make sense of those moments when you do blank on a word when you're trying to speak Spanish? Well, first, what happens to your brain when you learn a language, especially as you get older? Well, studies have shown that learning a language can actually help protect your brain as you age. For example, one study looked at 102 bilinguals and 109 monolinguals and found that bilinguals were on average 5.1 years older than monolinguals at the age of onset of symptoms of dementia, independent of education, occupational status, and gender. Now, when asked about this research, one of the co-authors, John Grundy, said, maybe the most surprising thing about the study is the consistency of the effect. It is a very robust finding. He then went on to say, the good thing is it's never too late and there are protective benefits of bilingualism and other factors even at later ages in life. In other words, even if you start learning a new language later in life, it's having a protective effect on your brain. And if you want to keep diseases like dementia or Alzheimer's at bay, language learning is a great thing to do. But maybe you're wondering, okay, that's fine. I get it. Language learning is going to help my brain. But what about top performance? Can I still really reach a high level in a new language even if I start later in life? Well, to tackle this question, I want to tell you about one of the best Spanish students I've ever tested who is 79 years old. But I know that that's only anecdotal evidence. So I'm going to start with the science and then come back to this 79-year-old student in a moment. So in the 1940s, two researchers, Raymond Cattell and Donald Hebb, published a series of papers on what we now refer to as the theory of fluid and crystallized intelligence, where fluid intelligence involves the ability to reason abstractly and solve novel problems and is considered independent of prior learning, experience, and education. Examples of fluid intelligence are solving puzzles and abstract problems. Then crystallized intelligence is based on facts, procedures, and knowledge accumulated through learning and experience. And if we look on Wikipedia under the topic of fluid and crystallized intelligence, we can see that examples of crystallized intelligence include vocabulary, general information, abstract word analogies, and the mechanics of language. So of the two types of intelligence that Cattell and Hebb discovered, crystallized intelligence is more important for language learning. And so the next question is, how does fluid and crystallized intelligence change as you age? Well, from the research on this topic, we find that studies of intelligence and the aging brain have revealed that fluid intelligence typically peaks early in life, around age 20, and then steadily declines with age, whereas crystallized intelligence peaks later in life and remains relatively stable with a gradual decline after the age of 65. They then went on to reference a study of 494 cognitively unimpaired older adults between 60 and 84 years that examined the effects of age on intelligence scores. Their models found a significant age-related decline in fluid intelligence, whereas crystallized intelligence remained relatively stable. Now, all of this boils down to, if we ask a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old to memorize a list of vocabulary words, the 60-year-old might actually perform better because this is a test of crystallized intelligence, which peaks later in life. Now, this may be the most fascinating and important thing that I discovered while researching this video, and is the main takeaway that crystallized intelligence is what's most important and it tends to peak later. Now, I get it. If you're 60 or 70, you may not feel this way. You may not feel that you could outperform your younger self. And I'm going to come back to this feeling in a moment because it's an important part of the discussion. But first, let's go back and talk about one of the best students I have ever worked with over the years. At Real Fast Spanish, we test students coming into our Spanish school almost every day. And we've been running our school for 11 years. So in that time, we've tested over 3,000 students. Yet there have only been 2 students who achieved a perfect score on our placement test. One student was in her 40s and living in Barcelona doing intense Spanish study at the time. And the other was a 79-year-old who started learning Spanish when he was 71. Now, his story was fascinating because he was living in North Carolina and had never studied Spanish in a Spanish-speaking country. And I remember he wanted to take a course in our school, but I told him that I didn't recommend any of our courses because he was so advanced. But of course, I then had to ask him, since we get so many students in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who have this concern that their memory is not what it used to be in their 30s, I wanted to know how he thought about this problem. Well, in short, he gave me a version of the Serenity Prayer. He said, I can't control my age, but I can control my attitude, my dedication and time that I put into my Spanish, and what I do on a daily basis. I then went on to ask him about language learning methods and what he was doing on a daily basis, and I was pleased to hear that he liked to use a variety of methods, which is what we talk about on this channel. He had attended language courses and classes, he'd worked with different teachers, he'd used reading, both grammar books and fiction books, he'd read a lot of the articles at Real Fast Spanish, and he had watched our YouTube videos. Now, I love to share his story because it demonstrates to me what is possible for someone learning Spanish in their 70s with no language learning background earlier in life. Personally, I'm in my 40s, so I can't talk about what it's like to learn a language at 50, 60, or 70, but I can talk about a feeling that I've been getting lately. The other day, I was standing in the kitchen and my wife asked me if we had any bread for lunch. And I said, the bread is, and I paused because I forgot the word I was looking for. My wife said stale, and I said, oh yes, that's the word. But how could I forget the word stale and stale bread? It was a bizarre moment, but I wondered, and I think it's easy to wonder this, is my memory slipping? As I'm getting older, is this what's starting to happen? Now, I quickly went to test myself using Anki flashcards, which is what I use all the time, to see if I was forgetting more words than usual, and my performance wasn't measurably different to any other day. Now, I think one of the most important takeaways is that a big part of language learning at any age is dealing with this tip of the tongue feeling. Like sometimes we're going to forget words, and something I've noticed as a Spanish teacher is that younger students forget words all of the time, but when they forget words, they're more likely to blame it on being tired or not having their morning coffee. Whereas older students often think, oh, maybe I'm forgetting that word now because I'm getting older. But you have to keep in mind that forgetting is something that naturally occurs in the brain. And in the 1800s, Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered the forgetting curve. And I've talked about this before on the channel, right? This curve tells us that within 24 to 48 hours, we naturally forget a good chunk of what we've learned. And that's how memory works for everyone, regardless of age. So my main advice, don't let the normal forgetting curve make you feel like your memory is on the decline. We've seen that crystallized intelligence is what is most important for language learning and that it peaks later in life. Plus, there are techniques you can use to improve your memory for vocabulary and facts. And for tips on boosting retention and tackling this forgetting curve, check out this video here where I go into more detail on how our brains retain information and the strategies you can use to remember more Spanish vocabulary.